Hi, welcome to Film Foolery. I'm Blake, and along with my friends Brady and Carson, we review, criticize, and make fun of movies, TV, and other such media, while also giving variety content. Today is our review of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. Written by Tom Gormican and Kevin Etten, and directed by Tom Gormican as well. This movie also stars Neil Patrick Harris and Tiffany Haddish in its supporting cast. In this movie, Nicolas Cage, as himself, is down on his luck as an actor and at the end of his rope with his estranged family. He decides to take a job as being a guest at a birthday party of some rich guy, who we come to find out may or may not be the leader of a Spanish cartel, played by Pedro Pascal. Cage is recruited by the CIA to help try and rescue the daughter of a presidential candidate in Spain from said potential cartel leader, and hilarity ensues. We hope you enjoy our review of the film, and if you like what you see, subscribe and hit that like button. And enjoy.
Okay, we have just gotten done watching The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent with Nick Cage and Pedro Pascal, and this is what we think of the film. To start off with, the film was amazing. It's a great film. I wouldn't say a family film. Would you guys call it a family film?
Not particularly.
Yeah. It's more of a film for people who really like Nick Cage or Pedro Pascal, and people that also just love movies that are just fun movies that are not really something to be picked apart, but something just sit back and enjoy.
I don't know that it has to be what you said. It's for people who just love fun movies, because I don't know a dadgum thing about Nick Cage or Pedro Pascal. I'm just a normal dude off the street, really.
Yeah.
But no, there's something about it. It's where I love how it just inherently does not take itself seriously, which is a quality that I love in movies like that are comedy films. Mm-hmm. And I said this, and we're probably going to put this in, but I said this in the reacting to it in the time. This is like the Life of Pi for movies instead of a survival story.
Yeah.
And it genuinely is. It's so meta, and my mind was blown because I really didn't have any preconceived notion of the plot. And to figure out that the movie that we are watching is the movie they are making was just so meta and great. So yeah, it was a smart comedy.
Yeah, I really do like that throughout the movie they touched on and even talked about parts of the movie. They even pointed out specifically what acts were taking place at points. Whenever the kidnapping was really brought back into the plot, they started talking about maybe in our movie there should be a kidnapping, or now it's time to figure out how this thing ends. And they were talking about the third act and all this when the third act began.
I think it's a perfectly enjoyable Nick Cage movie, but I think as great as I love Nick Cage, I still think the true standout was Pedro Pascal. He was great in his role, and I think he's one of the best actors on the working today. In all honesty, mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course he's shown that in The Mandalorian and that show on HBO, The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I also love how this movie it's how to put it into words. It's like, yeah, as Brady said, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think it's like it also acts as somewhat of a parody of movies that Nicolas Cage has done before, like especially a lot of action flicks.
The whole movie felt like a parody of different genres itself,
yeah,
and also parody of like movies in general. It was there to kind of criticize things, and it was also there to point out where in his career Nick Cage was at the time.
And it's also like a parody of acting and the acting industry in general in a lot of ways.
Like
the
how-
whole, like the first part of the movie where he's in LA and he has the manager, you know, the this and the that, and all the, you know, the Nick Cage sort of like, I really want to be in this film, and you know, and then
The moving around, the way he overacts and all this.
Exactly.
It really does show like how some washed up actors really go about it. So a way that I want to do this is eventually there's a movie called Babylon that
Okay.
either I'll buy or we need to watch.
I've heard of it. Yeah,
It's a really good movie. You know how this film kind of talked about like how like wash up actors are and all this, right?
Yep.
The movie touches on it well, but at the beginning of Hollywood. The beginning, like with the
heard of it,
talkies
yeah.
and stuff like that. We got to watch that to give a juxtaposition to this film, because that film takes itself very seriously while this one doesn't, and it both touches on somewhat of the same things in different ways.
And that's the one with Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie, right? Am I
Yes.
remembering? Yeah.
Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and a few other stars.
Tobey Maguire.
Tobey Maguire is in it. I forgot he's in
So
it.
many years of my working in the film industry, he made a huge comeback with Babylon.
Nice. Good for him.
Yep.
Good for him, man.
But I do, if there was one downside to this film, it was the Nick Cage talking to young superstar Nick Cage during the film. There was one part specifically that I'll put in probably right here after I say this to show our reaction. Like, his was horror. He just looked surprised, and I sat there and cringed. Younger Nick Cage kissed older Nick Cage, and it was like a very sensual thing, and it just felt very uncomfortable.
Come here. Yeah, Nick Cage smooches good.
The young Nick Cage clips in this were just... I don't think the movie needed them. I can get it. I get why. But I think it would have been a lot better if they did it a different way than what they had done it in the film. I can understand why they did it that way. I can understand why it is that way. But it was just very hard to watch at those points. And those were the points in the movie where I just want to go skip, skip, skip.
For sure.
To get back to the things that actually mattered here.
Yeah, that was just it was just an unnecessary thing, really. You know, it was I get why they put it in, because it's like the whole, you know, angel on the shoulder, devil on the shoulder, sort of the person talking to themselves. Except there's
had the angel on the shoulder.
It was a younger version
Him
of
and
himself.
younger version of himself that was
Well-
always telling him to go against his own best interests.
Well, I guess I get the idea of that, because it's young Nick Cage, this superstar, this hotshot, you know, sort of he's remembering what he was and remembering, because in this sort of
Something he couldn't let go of, basically.
Exactly.
His whole transformation.
and then he finally
was-
does.
Yeah, his whole transformation was letting go of of his want to be a superstar while learning to be more of a family man and also care for the people around him instead of his career.
Letting go of the fact that he's not 26 anymore, or however.
He's not making National Treasure. He's
Exactly.
not doing Face Off. He's not in the same place. As we had mentioned earlier, probably at the beginning of this video, we did the intro and all that at the beginning of the movie before we even started it, so
Yeah.
it may change and be different. We talked about the other movies that Nick Cage has done in this new era of his life, this new part of his life in his film career. He's doing movies he enjoys doing and movies that he just does for fun now. Like this. This must have been a blast for him. And then Willy's Wonderland, which he had barely any speaking part in. If you've seen that movie, he basically didn't speak at all in that movie. It was all left up to others, and it was basically a Five Nights at Freddy's ripoff that was actually really funny.
Willy Wonderland.
Stop. But then there was movies like Pig, which Pig was super weird. But he must have had I wouldn't say a great time doing it, but it must have been an experience for him.
He gives, in my opinion, he gives one of the best performances he gave in like a lot of years in that movie. It also does like a lot of psychological stuff too. It's a movie that makes you think.
Don't get too deep in it in case we react.
In case we watch it.
I'm just gonna leave it at that. It makes
So
Fair.
makes you think.
to compare him to another actor, Robin Williams. See, when he was younger and doing his acting career, he did a ton of comedy stuff like Mork and Mindy, and a ton of comedy bits like he was a comedian and all this.
He worked there's this place out in LA called the Comedy Store. And he
Yeah, the
worked out
Comedy
there
Store
doing all
and the
that
Laugh.
stuff.
Was it called the Laugh
With,
Track
like-
or the Laugh Off or
Well,
something?
there's like Richard Pryor came from that scene, David Letterman, like
Well,
all these great comics in
yeah.
the 70s.
But as you got into Robin Williams' acting career, he did all these funny stuff. Like he was on Happy Days as Mork, and then that spun off into
Mork and Mindy.
Mork and Mindy, which are really comedic and really good shows. I recommend you watch them. But as he got older and as he got wiser, he started to do more serious roles, with his most serious role being 1 Hour Photo, if you've ever seen that. I recommend you do. It's a very creepy film, and it's a very big difference from Robin Williams' main thing. But you see him doing Aladdin, you see him doing Miss Doubtfire, you see him do other things. But then he does movies like Good Will Hunting, Dead Poet Society, Bicentennial Man, which I think is one of his greatest films of all time,
So, Good Morning Vietnam.
and Good Morning
love
Vietnam.
that movie.
But they're very serious roles once he got older. See, Nick Cage did that way later on in his life, now in his 40s or 50s now, isn't he? But Robin Williams started doing that in his 30s to 40s, because he passed away at 60-something.
Something like that, yeah.
And just to compare it to another actor, Robin Williams and Nick Cage, they come from two very different genres of films. Nick Cage was a young action star. I want to say he did Race to Witch Mountain, but that was The Rock.
That was The Rock.
But he did National Treasure, Face Off. A few of them were named in this film, but I can't remember. The one where he was protecting the First Lady. A lot of action films, and now he's just doing what seems to be comedy and drama bits this time. Not bits, but acting roles. While looking at other stars, a lot of other stars don't do that. Yeah. Brad Pitt is someone you can kind of see doing that, but he still does action films, but he still does it in mostly the genres he enjoys still.
Well, that's got to be refreshing for them, because like to do not one character, but one style of thing for so long, to then hit a point in your career where you're like, you know what?
I'm going to do different.
I'm going to just completely change the game here and go with a completely different genre. That's got to be thrilling in a lot of ways.
Exactly. So, to compare it to that, it's just a really refreshing take on Nick Cage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think comparing it, as Brady said, or you said Brad Pitt, I also think the same of Tom Cruise. He really early in his life, of course he did a little action like Top Gun, like in the mid '80s, and then he did some dramatic roles like A Few Good Men and Jerry Maguire. And then he started to switch over to like a lot of. Nowadays he's like a full-on fledged action star. And he started Mission Impossible in the late '90s, and then he also started doing a few science fiction films, like Minority Report and War of the Worlds with Steven Spielberg. Yeah, and then nowadays he of course action star. But then there was a movie he did a few years ago called American Made, which he plays it's a true story, and he plays a pilot who smuggles drugs into another country. Yeah, and that I think that's one of the best dramatic performances he's given in recent years. But yeah, he's also great as an action star, and
It really is good to see actors like Nicolas Cage, Robin Williams, whenever he was still alive, God rest his soul.
Yes.
And Tom Cruise and not Brad Pitt. He stayed in the same genre kind of. He's bounced around, but he was more of a bounce around genre actor, anyways. Mm-hmm. But it's good to see actors like Nicolas Cage, Tom Cruise, and Robin Williams change their acting after they've stuck in a type of genre for a long time. Because you see him, especially in this movie, you do see Nick Cage's range on things.
yeah, for
He went from dramatic to comedic to weird and wacky to just having a lot of fun. And Pedro Pascal, we've seen him go from super serious in The Last of Us and kind of sad at points to really funny in this movie, and then kind of stoic in The Mandalorian whenever he was doing that, because there's a reason The Mandalorian hasn't taken off his helmet at all in the newer seasons, because Pedro Pascal doesn't want to put it back on.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an interesting thing about Hollywood and the way that they cast these roles, because when you really think about it, actors can do more than one character.
But the thing is, Hollywood's only looking for people that can really do one character, not one character, but one style for specific movies. Like, you don't see Chris Evans doing a sad film or whatever he's doing, big stuff like Captain America, or Chris Hemsworth doing the same thing. You don't see them in dramatic films. You just see them in, or like even somewhat comedies, except for Chris Hemsworth with Thor Love and well, I wouldn't say Love and Thunder, but Thor Ragnarok. But that was a superhero film made into a comedy. It wasn't a comedy as a superhero film. Yeah. They really do stick in the same things, but it's good to see actors that change and go out differently.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that, like, I do think, maybe this is a criticism of Hollywood. I do think these actors can do more than what they're just sort of typecast at. And I don't think you have to be 40, 50 years old in order to do that. That being said, maybe there is some sort of... Maybe Nick Cage has just hit the point where he's like, you know what, Hollywood, I'm going to do what I want to do. And
I think that's where he was. And
yeah.
I'm not saying Robin Williams was at that point
No,
ever.
of course
he wasn't,
not.
but he just wanted to really try, and
Yeah.
he did. And the movies he was in was amazing. But the thing is, the problem is stars like kind of Chris Hemsworth, who are now kind of comedic because they were written that way, but they're mostly action stars, or specifically The Rock. The Rock is the biggest example of this, who stick to either one type of character or one style of character and never change. The Rock has played the same character, even from the Mysterious Island all the way to Black Adam. It's been the same thing every movie for Fast and Furious, Rampage, Black Adam, Mysterious Island, big buff guy. Jumanji, who you think is kind of dumb, but is actually kind of smart, but is also charismatic and funny, but is also a big buff guy that's...
I thought he was very funny in Jumanji, though.
I'm a big fan of the original Jumanji. Robin Williams film again.
Yeah.
Robin Williams film again.
Yes.
But it felt so different than actual Jumanji, because Jumanji as a board game felt really cool, but as a video game felt more like another Hollywood, I wouldn't say cash grab, but another them pining to get to another reach for something. So that'll be it'll be relevant. I wish they would have come up with a more original idea, of course, because Hollywood can't do that anymore. They're always recycling things. I mean, Back to the Future is being rebooted. Sadly,
I'm
not looking forward to it.
Disney.
But imagine if they just
Yeah.
bite the bullet and cast Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr.
I would not watch that. I'm sorry. But this movie itself, what would you guys... We've covered most of this movie already.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the music? I thought the music choices were especially there that helped the characters and helped the actors themselves on how things want to be portrayed. Because there were points where the acting isn't weak, but it doesn't get across what it's needed, but the music helps it along.
There was...
Especially for you as a major, especially.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, there was the one at the beginning of the movie. I can't remember, but it was in the scene where they were taking the girl, busting down the door, and there was like... It was before they had Fortunate Son by CCR.
I didn't even notice Fortunate Son was there. I'm gonna.
It was some sort of CCR song. Maybe it wasn't Fortunate Son. Maybe it was.
But continue.
But it was, yes, one of those songs, and it was. They played a little bit of that. Stopped. Played another song. I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. I wish I would have made a note of it. But that one felt awkward. Everything else
was fine.
I'm gonna be fully honest. I'm not, given that I'm not much of a movie buff, I guarantee you I've watched a Wes Anderson film. Guarantee you I've watched
Life
one.
with Steve Zissou. What?
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Fantastic. Mr.
I have
Fox.
watched that. Okay,
That one is a
okay.
Wes Anderson.
I have for sure.
We've got to do those movies.
That is the music choice, plus the cinematography. Something about Wes Anderson to me right now screams modern Hollywood. The movies that are popular right now.
But it's also very esoteric in a different way than modern Hollywood.
You're right.
Because
You're right.
Hollywood is mostly Disney, Warner Bros, Marvel, DC, Star Wars.
Well, it's like there's these certain film, what do you call it? Film purists that are around.
Okay, yeah.
That are making these types of films. That sort of, this type of cinematography paired with the type of music, that is what I think of when I think of 2020's Hollywood, if that makes sense.
When you say film purists, the way I best think about it is, I forgot which director said it, but he criticized the Marvel films and were saying that they're forcing stuff.
Scorsese?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
He criticized them and said that they were pushing actual films out of the box office.
Well, they are.
They really are.
Yeah.
He calls them amusement park.
They
films.
really are amusement park
They
films.
are.
Because you're just going for a ride. You can turn your brain off. You don't have to think.
Yeah,
but the thing is, Wes Anderson films are built to be analyzed.
Yeah.
Stuff like this is built to be not analyzed, but it's built to be not picked apart, but deconstructed. Is the best way I can put that. It's not analyzing. It's not pick apart. It's deconstruction for stuff like this.
Yeah.
I'm an English major. I look at stuff and deconstruct it all the time because I'm doing that with books. So a movie like this keeps my interest.
And to be clear, I do like, we all three like the superhero movies and the superhero genre.
It's people that are still coming up with original film ideas, aren't recycling anything, and people that are always trying to innovate and change.
Who's the guy who did
change
Oppenheimer?
films. Christopher Nolan.
That guy. Add him to the list.
We will watch Christopher Nolan films. Don't worry. I still want to pick apart Batman. The Batman.
Totally.
The Dark Knight.
No, I'm just saying him, Scorsese, Anderson, they're all film purists.
I wouldn't even say purists, because purists imply something bad to where you're like, oh, there's our actual films if you do this. But they are films.
Traditionalists.
Traditionalists. That's a better way to put it.
Yeah.
But with stuff like this and with stuff like that, it's people coming up with original ideas, making films in a specific directing way. It's the reason Marvel is faces such criticism on their films, and now they used to and they still kind of do, is because they don't let the directors make the films. They have a specific template to make these films.
Yeah.
But movies like this are just really nice. This kind of did remind me of something Wes Anderson would do, but it doesn't have a Wes Anderson spin to it. If you haven't seen a Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, that movie, very underrated. It's very nice. It's very hard to find streaming, so you have to buy it online somehow, like through a DVD. I fully recommend it, and we'll watch it one day. I will buy it online if I have to. But I think that is the most Wes Anderson film of Wes Anderson films. And that shows his style more than anything. But to get back to the movie, so we're not going fully off track here. The music really did help along. I wouldn't say the directing is nice because I don't know how the directing is. I've never focused on directing, but from what it seemed, it really did show a style of film. Because the directing is the style of the film, basically. A really style of film that you can enjoy, you would like. I do think that this film could go without all the cursing. I do believe that. But I do understand when cursing is needed, when no other word can show emotion. As long as it's not excessive. I'm sorry to say, Deadpool is excessive.
No, you're 100% right.
Even though Deadpool's doing it on purpose to be funny, just because you curse doesn't make you funny.
No.
Deadpool, I wish, would come up with more clever ways.
Well, I mean, when you're 14, it's funny, but
Yeah.
for a mature adult, it's...
But I do think some of the cursing in this was a bit excessive, especially when it came to the CIA agents.
I could see it.
The CIA agents.
I could see it, but you have to understand, with them being in the situation that they are in the movie, this sort of high pressure thing, they're just letting all these curse words just fall out of their mouths because they're just, when I get frustrated and I get tense, yeah, I curse a little bit. I try not to, but it happens.
Yeah.
So I guess for that reason, I don't mind it, but I get exactly what you're saying.
But I do understand, because they do point out in this movie, as they're making their movie, because this is a movie inside of a movie, that they want it to be an adult film. And a lot of people, for some reason, they associate, that's what I was looking for, associate cursing with adult films. But you don't have to. You don't really have to. Like MASH, the original MASH movie, was a very adult film. But during that time, there was no cursing in that movie, but it was still an adult film. It's not something for children to watch, but it is very nice and very, which we will watch the original MASH one day. We have to. That movie, MASH, and movies during that time showed that to be an adult film, you do not need to curse. For some reason, in the modern day, people associate adult films with cursing and sex and violence, but you don't need that.
Doesn't make it an adult film.
You're right.
Like, the best way, even to tie it back to what we were saying earlier with Robin Williams, the best example I can give is Good Will Hunting. Mm-hmm. The cursing in that was necessary because, one, Boston culture has a lot of cursing. Yes. And these kids are coming from Boston. And a lot of people are from Boston. But when they actually put emphasis on the cursing, like whenever Will says something about his therapist's wife. You remember those scenes?
Yes.
When the therapist curses, he doesn't curse before then. He doesn't just say it willy-nilly. Yeah. He only says it when he's angry. So it makes it, or when he's trying to really get to Will. So it's necessary.
Yeah.
But movies like, some moments in this, you could say it wasn't necessary. You didn't have to.
Well, if you even
That's just a score against it for me.
You're absolutely right. When you even compare the classic comedy movies, like I'm trying to think here, The Naked Gun, Airplane. Sorry, I'm a Leslie Nielsen fan, but particularly Airplane, because I'll focus on that one. If you compare that to modern comedy movie, the obscenities within that genre has risen over time.
They're exponentially more. And yeah, that is something that doesn't necessarily have to sell a movie, but I think people automatically expect it. They automatically associate it with the genre at this point. Yeah. So we've gone over most of all we needed to go over for this movie. We're going to give a score, and just to give you another brief thing on the score, he doesn't watch much movies, so he's a casual moviegoer. That's the casual moviegoer score from him. From Brady. Me as Blake, I'm a movie buff. I know a ton about movies. I watch a ton of them, and I'm very knowledgeable. So I'm the movie buff score. Then we have the movie critic score with Carson, who does his own actual reviews on movies through his Snapchat, and will actually post them online on like Google reviews or Rotten Tomato and stuff. So he's our movie critic score. We're going to begin with our casual viewer score. Remember, 1 to 10 is actual score. -1 to 10 is the irony score. But we only give an irony score for things we actually believe are ironic. We don't have to give it for every movie. Like if we watch The Amazing Bulk, that would probably land on the irony score, not an actual score.
Sure.
But -10, just to explain, is a really bad movie, but it's so fun. It's so bad it's funny, and you can enjoy watching it. But a 10 is like one of the best movies we've seen. So we're going to begin with the casual movie score and go from there. Give us a little bit of reasoning as it why.
Of course, yeah, of course. I'm going to go with a solid 7 out of 10 on this one.
You can even go to points, by the way, 7.5 or 7 point whatever, if you need.
Right. I don't think that's necessary this time. There's something about it that it's an enjoyable film. It's redeeming. It's not exactly a family film, but it is not overly dirty in any way. It's an enjoyable film. It makes you think. It's just a good film, really. But it's not the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not the next, Goodfellas or the next big box office thing that's going to blow your socks off. But if, you have about an hour and a half you want to kill and you want to watch a movie that's going to make you laugh, going to make you think, I'd absolutely recommend this one. So,
onto the movie buff score. In my opinion, as someone who is very knowledgeable about movies, especially in the modern day, especially with the modern days type style of movies, I'm going to have to give this movie about a 7 to a 7 point. Well, actually, I'm going to say a 7.5 to a 7.8 because it's bordering on 8 because I think it's a really good film, and it's nice to see Nick Cage jump out of his normal, usual roles that he used to do in the action films, and also see Pedro Pascal just take on another role. But it's also really nice to see a movie that's so different from modern movies coming out these days. That's just so, I wouldn't say against the movies of the modern day, but it doesn't adhere to what you would expect. The music goes really well. The acting and directing was amazing. One of the things I have to say go against it is like I said, the sometimes unnecessary cursing and the Nick Cage scenes where he has talking to his younger self, and especially the one where he kisses himself. That one was painful. 7.5 to 7.8. It's either in between there, like a 7.65 would be a good one, or 7.7, somewhere around there. But it's very hard to define for me as a movie buff, but I do enjoy that it stepped out of bounds of modern movies and also stepped out of bounds of where Nick Cage usually rests in his roles. Go ahead. No.
You're about to, okay.
I was going to say, now on to the movie critic score.
All right, now I think I would have to go with a solid 6 out of 10 on this one.
Ooh, that's okay. Explain.
Now, I do think it's an enjoyable movie. Nothing incredible. Still pretty enjoyable. And Nicolas Cage, of course, is he's Nicolas Cage. Sometimes he's a decent action star, and sometimes he can be an over dramatic in his dramatic chops a little bit, and But yeah, the light truly shines on Pedro Pascal. I think he was the standout of the movie.
I wouldn't disagree with you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
But also, I think the comedy, as much as I appreciate the comedy, I think sometimes it can be a little bit over the top. Similar criticism of Thor Ragnarok. Sometimes big criticism with Thor Love and Thunder, but yeah. And then I do appreciate how the movie itself doesn't take itself too seriously. And yeah, I think the cursing was a bit over the top too. It didn't really add much to the comedy, and that pretty much sums it up.
So
Yeah.
to put it all together, we have about a 7 out of 10 on the casual viewer score. On the movie buff score is a 7.5 to 7.8, and on the critic score is a solid 6 out of 10. We all made some great points here, and I'm not going to argue with either of you, or I'm guessing you guys aren't going to argue with me about our score as well.
Yours was terrible. I can't believe. Oh, sorry.
But
Respected opinion.
thank you guys so much for watching this, and we look forward to doing more on this channel. We also look forward to putting out our variety content, and here in a few weeks, about 2 weeks, we'll probably be putting out our first Discord movie laugh at video is the best way to put that.
Can I say something real quick? If you like what you watched, be sure to like and subscribe. If you don't like what you watched, tell someone you don't like to like and subscribe.
Thank you. So, have fun, good night, and we'll see you later.